Take one more step and I'll have you removed." The words cracked through the evening air so sharply that conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Cameras lifted. The polished entrance of the Arlington Grand Hotel, glowing beneath rows of golden lights, suddenly felt colder than the November wind sweeping down the avenue. Officer Daniel Mercer stood at the center of the marble driveway, one hand resting near his radio, chin raised with the confidence of a man who believed authority alone could settle any question. In front of him stood Vanessa Carter, calm and motionless, dressed in a charcoal coat and simple heels, a leather tote resting at her side. She did not look away. She did not argue. She only studied him with the quiet patience of someone measuring a moment no one else understood. Behind them, guests in tuxedos and evening gowns drifted toward the ballroom where the city's biggest charity gala was about to begin. Valets jogged between black sedans and shining SUVs. Flashbulbs popped near the red carpet. Somewhere inside, a jazz trio played softly enough to sound like another world. But here at the curb, all attention had narrowed to one scene. "You're blocking access to a private event," Mercer said louder this time, making sure the nearby crowd could hear. "If you're looking for the service entrance, it's around back." A few people exchanged glances. One man smirked into his phone screen. Vanessa's expression did not change. "I'm exactly where I need to be," she said, her voice even and warm, carrying none of the panic Mercer expected. That answer irritated him more than resistance would have. He stepped closer, polished shoes clicking against the stone. No invitation. No credentials. No entry. Pretty simple. He held out his hand. "Bag." The word landed like a command, not a request. Vanessa looked at his hand, then at his badge, then back into his eyes. "Officer," she asked softly, "are you sure you want to do this in front of everyone?" The question drew a few murmurs. Mercer laughed once, short and dismissive. "What I'm sure of is that people like you always think rules don't apply." He reached for the tote. Vanessa released it. Without a struggle. The ease of it unsettled him for half a second, but pride moved faster than doubt. He opened the bag and glanced through a notebook, reading glasses, a phone charger, and a folded program from the evening's event. Nothing dramatic. Nothing suspicious. Yet now too many people were watching for him to retreat. "That's what I thought," he muttered, though he had found nothing at all. Vanessa checked the slim silver watch on her wrist. "They're late," she said. "Who is?" Mercer snapped. She lifted her eyes toward the street beyond him. "The people who don't like being kept waiting." Before he could answer, the distant hum of engines rolled down the avenue. It began as a vibration underfoot, then a sound that made valets stop moving and reporters turned their cameras toward the corner. 3 black SUVs rounded the block in perfect formation, headlights sweeping across the hotel facade. The first stopped at the curb with quiet precision. Then the second. Then the third. Doors opened in near unison. 6 men and women stepped out in tailored dark suits, earpieces visible, movements measured and professional. The sidewalk fell silent. Mercer's posture changed before his face did. The lead agent, a tall man with close-cropped hair and the stillness of military discipline, walked straight past the officer as if he were furniture. He stopped before Vanessa and lowered his head respectfully. "Carter," he said, voice steady. "Our apologies for the delay." Vanessa gave the smallest nod. "You're 38 seconds late, Marcus." "Won't happen again." Around them, every whisper died. Mercer stared as if language itself had abandoned him. And above the grand doors, inside a ballroom filled with the city's most powerful names, a host stepped to the microphone and smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "please welcome the founder of the Carter Foundation, Ms. Vanessa Carter." The applause inside the ballroom started slowly, then swelled into a wave that rolled through crystal chandeliers and marble columns like thunder contained in gold walls. Vanessa Carter stepped forward with the same quiet composure she had shown outside, while Marcus Reed and the rest of her security detail moved with practiced precision, never crowding her, never losing sight of the room. Officer Daniel Mercer remained near the entrance, frozen beside the velvet ropes where only minutes earlier he had stood like a gatekeeper. Now he looked like a man locked outside his own certainty. Guests whispered behind champagne glasses. Some recognized Vanessa immediately. Others were only now realizing they had watched one of the city's most influential women be publicly challenged at her own event. The host continued speaking, his smile polished but strained. For 12 years, the Carter Foundation has funded scholarships, housing programs, veterans assistance, and youth centers across the state. Each word landed heavier than the last. Mercer swallowed hard. He had heard the name before. Everyone had. He just never expected power to arrive in a plain coat carrying an everyday tote bag. Vanessa accepted the microphone but did not speak right away. She let the silence breathe. It was the kind of silence that made people examine themselves. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she said at last. Her voice was smooth, warm, impossible to ignore. "This gala supports dignity, opportunity, respect." She paused, eyes drifting briefly toward the entrance. Interesting words. Especially when tested at the door. A ripple passed through the room. No one needed an explanation. Cameras turned. Mercer felt dozens of eyes land on him at once. The hotel manager, pale and sweating, hurried to his side. "Officer Mercer," he whispered, "perhaps it would be best if you stepped outside for a moment." Mercer straightened instinctively. "I was doing my job." But the sentence sounded weaker once spoken aloud. "Were you?" The voice came from behind him. Marcus Reed had appeared without warning, calm as stone. "Because from where I stood, it looked personal." Mercer bristled. "You threatening me?" Marcus almost smiled. "No, sir. Just clarifying the difference between security and ego." Across the ballroom, Vanessa continued. "When people are judged by appearance, accent, skin, or assumption, we reveal more about ourselves than them." The crowd answered, with louder applause than before. Several donors rose to their feet. Mercer's jaw tightened. He wanted to disappear, but pride kept him rooted in place. Then another voice joined the moment. "Daniel." He turned sharply. Captain Laura Bennett of the Arlington Police Department stood near the entrance, dress uniform immaculate, expression unreadable. 2 internal affairs officers stood behind her. Mercer's face drained of color. "Captain, I can explain." "I hope so," she said evenly. "Because half this room has footage, and the other half has influence." She glanced toward Vanessa, who met her eyes with a respectful nod. "You are relieved for the evening. Turn over your radio." Mercer hesitated only a second too long. "Now," Bennett said. The ballroom had gone nearly silent again. Even the musicians had stopped playing. Mercer unclipped the radio from his shoulder and handed it over with trembling fingers. It was a small sound when it changed hands, but it echoed like something larger breaking. Vanessa stepped down from the stage and walked toward them. Every camera followed. She stopped a few feet away from Mercer. No anger. No triumph. Only steadiness. "Officer," she said, "I came tonight to raise money for young people who are told they do not belong in certain rooms." Her gaze never left his. "Thank you for demonstrating why the work is still necessary." Mercer opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. Vanessa turned and entered the center of the ballroom as guests parted for her like water. Behind her, the room rose in applause again. And Daniel Mercer, still wearing the badge he trusted a little too much, suddenly understood how small it could feel. The gala resumed, but the room had changed in ways no decorator could fix. Music returned, glasses clinked again, conversations restarted, yet every polished smile now carried the memory of what had happened at the entrance. Vanessa Carter moved through the ballroom greeting donors, educators, veterans, and community leaders with effortless grace, but people no longer approached her merely as a philanthropist. They approached her as a mirror. Some with admiration. Some with embarrassment. Some with questions they had never asked themselves before. At the far end of the room, Officer Daniel Mercer sat alone in a private lounge just off the main corridor, his uniform jacket folded beside him, collar damp with sweat. Captain Laura Bennett had ordered him to remain there until transport arrived. Through the half-open door he could hear applause each time Vanessa spoke to another group. Every cheer sounded personal. He replayed the last hour again and again, searching for a version where he looked better in the story. He found none. The lounge door opened. Captain Bennett stepped inside carrying a tablet. "You should see this now," she said. Mercer stared at the screen she handed him. Video clips had already spread online. Different angles. Different voices. His own face sharper than he remembered. His own tone colder than he believed. Headlines were appearing by the minute. City officer confronts charity founder. Security footage raises questions. Public demands review. "This is out of context," Mercer muttered. Bennett did not sit. Context is what people say when the footage is clear. She took back the tablet. "Do you know why I wore this badge for 26 years without disgrace?" Mercer said nothing. "Because I learned early that authority is not respect. It is borrowed trust." Her words hung in the room longer than shouting ever could. In the ballroom, Vanessa was being introduced to a row of scholarship recipients from neighborhoods her foundation had funded for years. Teenagers in pressed suits and simple dresses stood nervously beneath chandeliers they had probably only seen in movies. Vanessa smiled at each one, asking names, majors, dreams. She treated every answer like it mattered. Because to her, it did. One young woman named Brianna hesitated before speaking. "Ms. Carter, how did you stay so calm out there?" Vanessa's eyes softened. "Because some people expect your anger. They do not know what to do with your composure." Brianna nodded slowly, carrying the sentence like something valuable. Across the room, Marcus Reed scanned exits and sightlines, but even he allowed himself a brief smile. He had worked security for governors, entertainers, and executives. Few carried pressure the way Vanessa did. She never needed to announce power. Rooms discovered it on their own. Near 9 o'clock, the mayor arrived late and hurried over with cameras trailing behind him. "Vanessa, on behalf of the city, I want to apologize for tonight." She shook his hand politely. "Then do not apologize to me," she said. "Apologize to everyone without cameras who gets treated that way every day." The mayor's practiced smile faltered. Reporters wrote furiously. In the lounge, Mercer heard the applause that followed and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, silence felt louder than praise. A transport officer soon appeared at the door. "Sir, I need your badge." Mercer looked up slowly. "My captain already relieved me." "Temporary relief," the officer replied. "This is administrative hold pending review." Mercer unclipped the badge from the table where he had placed it and stared at the metal circle that once felt like identity itself. Then he handed it over. In the ballroom, Vanessa returned to the stage for the final pledge drive. She looked over the crowd, then beyond them, as if speaking to people not even in the room. "Tonight was never about embarrassment," she said. "It was about exposure. Sometimes the truth arrives before dinner is served." Laughter mixed with applause. Donations surged higher than any year before. And somewhere beyond the bright ballroom doors, a man who had mistaken control for character walked into the cold night feeling both lighter and far more empty. By the time the last guest stepped into the winter night, the Arlington Grand Hotel had become more than a venue. It had become a story people would repeat in offices, kitchens, patrol cars, and boardrooms before sunrise. Staff folded linens and stacked chairs while reporters still waited outside beneath bright portable lights. Inside a quiet conference room on the second floor, Vanessa Carter sat at the head of a long walnut table reviewing final donation numbers with her foundation directors. The total had broken every previous record. Yet she looked less interested in the money than in the messages flooding her phone. Teachers thanking her. Parents sharing old experiences. Young people saying they had seen themselves in her calm. Marcus Reed stood near the window, scanning the street below. 3 local stations are still outside, he said. They want a statement in the morning. Vanessa nodded. They can have one then. Tonight belongs to the students. She signed a packet of scholarship approvals and slid them across the table. Make sure the first notifications go out at 8 o'clock sharp. Across town, Daniel Mercer sat alone in his apartment with the television muted and the city skyline glowing beyond the blinds. Every channel carried some version of the same footage. His own gestures. Vanessa's stillness. The arrival of the security team. Analysts discussed policy. Commentators debated bias. Former officers spoke about training and accountability. Mercer turned off one screen only to see the same clip reflected on his phone. Calls from colleagues had slowed to silence. Messages from friends had become cautious, then absent. For a man who once believed reputation was permanent, the speed of change felt unreal. A knock came at his door. He opened it to find his younger sister, Emily Mercer, still wearing hospital scrubs from a long nursing shift. She walked in without waiting for permission. I watched it, she said quietly. Daniel looked away. Then you know they are twisting everything. Emily set her keys on the counter. No. I know I have been telling you for years that the way you talk about people matters. Her voice was not angry. That made it harder to ignore. You always said you could read trouble just by looking at someone. She paused. What you meant was you stopped seeing people as individuals. Daniel sank into a chair. You do not understand what the job is like. Maybe not, she replied. But I know what dignity looks like when someone loses it. I work 12-hour shifts helping people pick up the pieces. The room went still. Across the city, Vanessa finally left the hotel through a side entrance to avoid cameras. Snow flurries drifted under streetlights like ash made gentle. Marcus opened the SUV door, but Vanessa stopped before getting in. A janitor was sweeping near the curb, bundled in an old coat. He recognized her and smiled nervously. What you said in there tonight, thank you. Vanessa smiled back. What is your name? Harold. Harold, thank you for taking care of a place where many people only notice the chandeliers. He laughed in surprise. She shook his hand before entering the vehicle. Small gestures often reached farther than speeches. The next morning, the city woke early. Editorial boards called for reform. Community groups organized meetings. The mayor announced an emergency review of event security partnerships with police. Captain Laura Bennett arrived at headquarters before dawn and found a line of officers waiting outside her office, some defensive, some embarrassed, some ready for change. She looked at them all and said only one sentence. Today we decide what this badge means next. Meanwhile, in a modest apartment 20 miles away, Brianna, the scholarship student Vanessa had encouraged, opened an email with trembling hands. Full tuition. Housing included. She covered her mouth and cried with joy. At that same hour, Daniel Mercer checked his mailbox and found a certified letter marked Internal Affairs. 2 envelopes. 2 futures. Same sunrise. And somewhere in the city, Vanessa Carter was already dressed for the next meeting, because justice, unlike headlines, did not sleep late. A badge can open doors, Captain Laura Bennett said to the packed briefing room, but character decides what happens once you walk through them. The words landed over rows of uniforms like a weight no one could shift. It was 8:15 in the morning, less than 12 hours after the gala, and every seat inside headquarters was filled. Officers stood along the walls. Supervisors held tablets loaded with statements, policy memos, and public complaints that had multiplied overnight. Some faces showed irritation. Others showed shame. Many showed uncertainty. On the front screen, paused footage from the hotel entrance glowed in frozen clarity. No one needed it explained. Laura looked across the room and saw an institution at a crossroads. Effective immediately, she continued, all public contact protocols are under review. Bias training becomes mandatory. Complaint investigations will be reopened where evidence was ignored. We are not defending habits anymore. A murmur moved through the room. One veteran sergeant raised his hand. Captain, are we really rewriting policy because of one bad night? Laura met his stare. No. We are rewriting policy because too many nights were never filmed. Silence followed. Across town, Vanessa Carter entered the Carter Foundation headquarters, a renovated brick building that once housed a textile warehouse and now funded futures. Staff members rose when she walked in, but she waved them back to work. No ceremony, she said. We have deadlines. Her executive assistant handed over the morning schedule, media requests, and 3 boxes of letters already delivered by courier. Vanessa opened one at random. Inside was a handwritten note from a mother she had never met. My son asked me last night why that officer acted that way. I did not know how to answer. Then he watched how you stood there. Thank you for giving me a better answer than words. Vanessa folded the letter carefully and placed it in her bag. Marcus Reed noticed. You keep the hard ones. They keep me honest, she replied. At the same hour, Daniel Mercer sat across from 2 internal affairs investigators in a windowless room painted a shade of grey designed to feel neutral and somehow never did. A recorder blinked red between them. State your name for the record. Daniel Mercer. Did you have prior knowledge that Ms. Carter was hosting the event? No. Did you have evidence she posed a threat? Daniel hesitated. No. The investigator wrote something down. The sound of the pen seemed louder than it should have been. Then explain why your response escalated. Daniel opened his mouth with several answers ready. Procedure. Instinct. Security concern. But each one sounded weaker than the truth he had avoided for years. I made assumptions, he said at last. The investigators exchanged no reaction, which somehow felt worse than judgment. In South Arlington, Brianna and her mother rode a city bus to the university admissions office carrying the scholarship. Letter in a plastic folder as if rain itself might try to steal it. Her mother squeezed her hand every few minutes, smiling through tears she no longer tried to hide. You are really going, she whispered. Brianna looked out the window at streets she had known her whole life and saw them differently. Opportunity can make familiar places feel brand new. By afternoon, reporters gathered outside police headquarters. Some demanded resignations. Some asked about reforms. Some simply wanted conflict. Captain Bennett stepped to the podium and gave them something rarer than drama. Clarity. Accountability is not anti-police, she said. It is anti-failure. The statement led every evening broadcast. Later that day, Vanessa visited a youth center her foundation supported. No cameras. No press. Just folding chairs, homework tables, and kids who knew her only as Ms. Carter. One boy asked, "Are you famous now?" She laughed softly. I hope not. Famous fades fast. Then what matters? He asked. Vanessa knelt to meet his eyes. What you build when no one is looking. As the sun dropped behind the city skyline, Daniel Mercer walked home carrying a cardboard box of personal items from his locker. A coffee mug. A spare notebook. Commendation pins that suddenly looked decorative. He passed a store window and caught his own reflection. For the first time in years, he did not see authority staring back. Only a man being introduced to himself. 3 days later, rain tapped softly against the tall windows of City Hall as rows of folding chairs filled with residents, reporters, clergy leaders, teachers, students, and officers in plain clothes. The emergency public hearing on trust and policing had drawn more people than anyone expected. Hallways overflowed. Screens were set up inside rooms. For the first time in years, the city was not discussing crime statistics or campaign promises. It was discussing dignity. At the center dais sat council members with stacks of notes and expressions carefully balanced between concern and calculation. Captain Laura Bennett stood near the wall waiting to testify. Vanessa Carter sat in the second row beside Marcus Reed, wearing a navy blazer and no visible sign of importance except the calm everyone had learned to recognize. Daniel Mercer entered quietly through a side door and took a seat in the back where cameras could still find him if they wished. They did. He felt the lenses turn like weather. The hearing opened with public comment. A school principal described students who no longer trusted uniforms. A retired officer spoke about good cops losing credibility when bad habits were protected. A nurse described calming frightened patients after traffic stops that became humiliations. Then Brianna, scholarship letter tucked inside her notebook, stepped to the microphone with shaking hands. "I was at the gala," she said. "I watched a powerful woman stay calm while someone tried to make her smaller. I learned 2 things that night. Power is loud when it is insecure. Real power does not need to raise its voice." The chamber broke into applause before the gavel restored order. Vanessa smiled but kept her eyes down, letting the young woman own the moment. When her turn came, Captain Bennett approached the microphone with the posture of someone who had practiced discipline longer than speeches. "Institutions fail slowly," she said. Then all at once. She recommended independent complaint review, expanded de-escalation training, mentorship reform, and community performance metrics tied to promotion. Council members who expected defensiveness instead received blueprint. Notes were taken furiously. Then the chair announced the final scheduled speaker. Ms. Vanessa Carter. The room straightened almost as one. Vanessa walked to the microphone, placed both hands lightly on the wood, and looked across the chamber as if seeing each person individually. "I did not come because I was embarrassed," she began. "I came because too many people are embarrassed every day without witnesses." Silence settled deep and complete. The question is not whether one officer behaved poorly. The question is why so many recognized the pattern instantly. A councilman shifted uncomfortably. Another stopped writing and simply listened. "I fund schools, clinics, shelters, veterans programs," she continued. "Do you know what those investments have in common? They all cost more when trust is broken first." Even the reporters lowered their screens. Then something unexpected happened. Daniel Mercer rose from the back row. Murmurs spread like wind through grass. He walked forward slowly, each step sounding louder than it should have on polished tile. He stopped at the secondary microphone reserved for unscheduled remarks. "Council Chair," he said, voice rough but steady, "I request 60 seconds. Permission was granted after a tense pause. Daniel looked nowhere but forward. "I cannot defend what I did. I judged before I knew. I used authority where respect was required. Many people are paying for habits people like me normalized." He swallowed hard. "I am sorry, Ms. Carter." Cameras flashed. Some scoffed. Some leaned closer. Vanessa studied him for a long moment. "Apology is a sentence," she said calmly. "Change is a paragraph. Keep writing." A sound moved through the chamber that was not quite applause and not quite surprise. It was recognition. Daniel lowered his head once and stepped back. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight pushed through the clouds in narrow bands across the city streets below. By evening, every station replayed the exchange, but what people remembered most was not shame. It was possibility. Because when truth enters a room, even old walls begin to look temporary. The morning after the hearing, the city sounded different. Radio hosts who usually traded outrage for ratings were discussing reform with unexpected seriousness. Coffee shops replayed clips from the council chamber. Barber shops debated accountability between laughter and hard truths. In office towers and apartment kitchens, people repeated the same line Vanessa Carter had spoken into the microphone: "Apology is a sentence. Change is a paragraph." It moved through the city because everyone knew someone who needed to hear it. At police headquarters, Captain Laura Bennett posted a new notice beside the duty roster. Community listening sessions. Mandatory attendance by district rotation. No exceptions. Some officers rolled their eyes before reading the second line. Uniforms optional. Egos not permitted. By noon, the first session filled a recreation center gym with folding chairs arranged in a circle instead of rows. Teachers sat beside patrol officers. Teenagers sat beside sergeants. Parents sat beside dispatchers. No podium. No rank at the center. Just conversation. Daniel Mercer entered quietly and chose a seat near the back, but there was no back in a circle. He noticed people recognize him. Some frowned. Some whispered. One man simply stared, then looked away. Daniel almost left twice before the meeting began. Then a volunteer facilitator spoke. Today is for listening, not defending. Those 6 words felt heavier than any command he had followed in uniform. Across town, Vanessa visited Arlington State University with Brianna, whose scholarship had become local news after the gala. Students lined the campus walkway under oak trees stripped bare by winter. Brianna kept glancing at the stone buildings as if they might disappear if she blinked. "I still cannot believe this is real," she said. Vanessa smiled. Many doors feel unreal until you walk through them. They toured classrooms, the library, and a business incubator funded partly by the Carter Foundation. At each stop, Brianna asked questions with growing confidence. Possibility was changing her posture in real time. Back at the recreation center, stories moved around the circle one by one. A father described teaching his son how to stay calm during traffic stops before teaching him algebra. A shop owner described being treated like a suspect inside his own store because an officer did not recognize him. A rookie patrol officer admitted he wanted to serve well but had inherited cynicism on day one. Daniel listened with arms folded at first, then with hands open, then with his eyes lowered. When his turn came, the room stiffened. He felt it. "My name is Daniel Mercer," he began. "I spent years thinking experience made me accurate." He looked around the circle. Sometimes it only made me practiced. No one interrupted. I confused suspicion with wisdom. Control with professionalism. I am learning how expensive those mistakes are for other people. A woman across from him, older with silver hair and a church hat resting in her lap, studied him carefully. "Learning is good," she said. "But who pays tuition?" The room grew still. Daniel nodded slowly. "I did not understand that until now." There was no applause. Just truth, which was better. That evening, Vanessa hosted a private dinner for scholarship recipients and their families in the foundation atrium. Nothing extravagant. Pasta, salad, warm bread, long tables, and music played softly through ceiling speakers. Brianna's mother hugged Vanessa with tears in her eyes. "You changed our family." Vanessa squeezed her hand gently. "No. Opportunity met effort. I just introduced them." Marcus Reed watched from nearby, smiling despite himself. Later, as guests departed into the cold night, Vanessa stood alone for a moment beneath the atrium lights. Marcus approached. "You know the city is calling you a hero now." She laughed softly. "Cities say many things when they are emotional." "And what do you call yourself?" he asked. Vanessa looked through the glass walls toward streets still carrying yesterday's headlines and tomorrow's needs. "Busy," she said. At the recreation center, Daniel was one of the last to leave. The silver-haired woman caught up with him near the door and handed him a folded flyer. "Youth mentorship volunteers needed. Saturdays." He looked surprised. "Why give this to me?" She adjusted her coat. "Because regret that serves no one is just vanity in a sad suit." Then she walked into the night, leaving Daniel under the streetlight holding the first useful invitation he had received in a long time. 2 weeks later, Saturday sunlight spilled across the windows of the Jefferson Community Center, turning the old hardwood floors gold. Folding tables were lined with notebooks, donated laptops, and trays of bagels that disappeared faster than anyone expected. The first youth mentorship session was beginning, and every seat was taken. Teenagers from across the city filed in wearing hoodies, varsity jackets, work uniforms, and the guarded expressions of people used to being measured before being known. Volunteers wore name tags and uncertain smiles. On one wall hung a new banner funded quietly by the Carter Foundation. Build futures louder than fear. Daniel Mercer stood near the coffee station in plain clothes, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles looked pale. Without the uniform, he seemed both younger and more tired. He had arrived 30 minutes early, set up chairs, and nearly left twice. The silver-haired woman from the listening session, Mrs. Eleanor Price, noticed everything and commented on nothing. She simply handed him a stack of folders and said, "If you are nervous, be useful." So he became useful. Across town, Vanessa Carter was touring a new housing project with city planners and non-profit directors, but her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus Reed. Mentorship launch full house. Mercer showed up. Vanessa read it once, then slipped the phone back into her coat pocket. "Good," she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. At the community center, Mrs. Price tapped a microphone that squealed once before behaving. "Welcome," she announced. "This room is for skills, honesty, and second chances. Some of you need one. Some of you deserve one. Most of you are both." Laughter loosened the room. Students were paired with volunteers for workshops on resumes, budgeting, public speaking, and college applications. Daniel was assigned to a table labeled Career Paths and Real Questions. 3 teenagers approached with visible skepticism. One of them, a tall 17-year-old named Jamal, sat down backward in his chair and folded his arms. "You used to be a cop, right?" Daniel nodded. "Used to, yes." Jamal leaned back. "Then why should we listen to you?" Nearby conversation softened as ears quietly turned toward the table. Daniel could feel the old instinct to defend himself rise like muscle memory. He let it pass. "You should not listen because of what I was," he said. "You should listen only if what I say is useful." Jamal narrowed his eyes, surprised by the answer. Daniel continued. "I can teach interviews, discipline, mistakes to avoid, and how quickly pride can ruin a career. I know that one especially well." The 2 other students exchanged glances. One of them, a quiet girl named Tasha, opened her notebook first. "How do you answer when they ask?" "About weaknesses," she asked. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Tell the truth in a way that shows growth. For example, I used to think confidence meant never admitting fault." Pen started moving. By noon, the room buzzed with something stronger than suspicion. Momentum. Jamal asked about trade apprenticeships. Tasha practiced eye contact for interviews. Another student wanted advice on dealing with anger during conflict. Daniel answered carefully, often beginning with the phrase he had learned too late. "What I should have done was." Across the city, Vanessa arrived unannounced during the lunch break. She entered quietly through a side door, no cameras, no announcement, just Marcus one step behind her. Students noticed first. Then volunteers stood. Daniel looked up from helping Jamal format a resume and froze for a brief second. Vanessa walked table to table, greeting students by name from their registration badges. When she reached Daniel's station, Jamal grinned. "You know him." Vanessa looked at Daniel, then at the teenagers. "We met under memorable circumstances." The room laughed. Daniel managed a small smile. Vanessa picked up Tasha's practice resume. "This is strong," she said. "Who helped with it?" Tasha pointed at Daniel. Vanessa returned the paper and nodded once. No speech. No grand forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. Somehow it meant more. Before leaving, she addressed the room. "Talent is everywhere," she said. "Access is not. That is why rooms like this matter." Applause followed her to the door. As students settled back into workshops, Jamal looked at Daniel with new curiosity. "So, you really messed up, huh?" Daniel gave a short laugh. "Spectacularly." Jamal tapped the resume template. "Good thing you came anyway." And for the first time in many years, Daniel Mercer felt useful without needing to feel important. Spring arrived quietly, first through softer air, then through trees lining Arlington Boulevard waking green all at once. 3 months had passed since the night outside the hotel, and the city no longer spoke of it as scandal alone. People now called it a turning point. New complaint review boards had been approved. Recruitment standards changed. Listening sessions became permanent. Promotions required community evaluations alongside internal scores. Not everyone celebrated. Change rarely receives unanimous applause. But it had begun, and beginnings are stubborn things. At the Jefferson Community Center, the mentorship program now ran every Saturday with a waiting list. Resume workshops had expanded into internship placements, financial literacy classes, and scholarship coaching. Jamal had secured an apprenticeship interview with an electrical union. Tasha had been accepted into 2 colleges and was deciding between them with the seriousness of someone choosing a future instead of escaping a past. Mrs. Eleanor Price still arrived first and left last, ruling the front desk with reading glasses, peppermint candy, and surgical honesty. Daniel Mercer now volunteered 4 days a week. He handled logistics, mock interviews, and whatever else needed doing. He no longer introduced himself by former titles. Most students simply called him Mr. Daniel. It sounded smaller than Officer Mercer once had, yet somehow carried more weight. On a bright Saturday afternoon, the center hosted its first opportunity fair. Employers, trade unions, universities, and non-profit groups filled the gymnasium with booths and banners. Parents lined the walls taking pictures. Music played from a portable speaker that occasionally skipped but never surrendered. Marcus Reed managed security with his usual calm precision, though today it looked more like hospitality than protection. Vanessa Carter arrived without announcement, as she preferred, carrying 2 boxes of pizza because she knew grand entrances were overrated and hungry teenagers were not. Cheers rose when students spotted her. She laughed and told them to save that energy for acceptance letters. Jamal approached in a pressed shirt and tie. "I got the apprenticeship," he said, trying and failing to sound casual. Vanessa hugged him first. "No," she corrected gently. "You earned the apprenticeship?" Tasha followed with 2 university folders in hand. "I chose Arlington State," she said. "Business major." Vanessa smiled. "Good. Build something that hires people." "Nearby." Daniel watched these moments with the quiet astonishment of a man learning that usefulness can heal what status never could. Mrs. Price appeared beside him as if summoned by humility itself. "You are standing there proud again," she said. Daniel glanced at her, embarrassed. "Is that bad?" "Depends," she replied. "Proud of yourself is dangerous. Proud of others is medicine." Then she walked off to correct a crooked table sign. Later that afternoon, Captain Laura Bennett arrived in civilian clothes to avoid attention and failed completely. The room recognized leadership when it entered honestly. She shook Daniel's hand. "Your file is closed," she said. He held her gaze. "And the result?" "Resignation accepted. Pension reduced. Eligibility for future service denied." She paused. "Also noted, substantial community volunteer hours." Daniel nodded once. The news landed without drama. He had lost the career he once worshipped months earlier. What remained was character, still under construction. As the fair ended, students and families gathered for a group photo on the front steps of the center. Vanessa stood near the back until Mrs. Price pulled her forward by the sleeve. "People hide when they are ashamed," the older woman said. "Stand front when you have done good." Laughter followed. Daniel tried to step aside as well, but Jamal grabbed his arm. "You too, Mr. Daniel." They crowded together under the warm evening sun while a volunteer raised a camera. In the front row sat scholarship students. Behind them stood parents, teachers, city workers, former critics, and unexpected allies. Vanessa and Daniel ended up 2 places apart. Not close friends. Not enemies. Something more adult than either. The shutter clicked 3 times. In the final photo, no badge was visible, no title announced, no spotlight assigned. Just people building something after being broken by something else. As everyone dispersed into the golden light, Vanessa looked toward the street where it had all begun months before. Marcus noticed. Thinking about that night, he asked. She smiled faintly. Only this part. Which part? Vanessa watched Jamal help Mrs. Price carry folding chairs while Daniel loaded leftover pizza into cars for families to take home. He thought power was something you wear, she said. Turns out it is something you practice.